We started out with a free bike. Let's see how cheap we can get this thing operating. And maybe take it on a little trip too. Hello my friends, and welcome to Tom's Tinkering and Adventures. A little while back I got this Kawasaki KZ750 behind me. It was given to me by a neighbor when they were moving, and I initially thought it was just junk, really. I didn't look too closely at it, but it was pretty rusty, and then I started looking through the box of stuff that came with it and noticed that it was mostly there. It looked pretty complete, so I decided to take a day and get it going. I'll put a link to that video, and the bike works, and most of the stuff on it works. So that being said, since I've got it for free and I got it going for basically nothing at this point, I decided I would try to see if I get this bike going for about $100. And $100 in parts. It's probably going to cost that much to get a license plate put on it, but we're just going to go with what the parts cost. And we'll see if we can't get this bike going and make it look okay. I mean, it doesn't look terrible, doesn't look great. We'll make it look okay, we'll make it function okay, we'll make it mostly safe. Mostly. And I think, you know, what the heck, since it's a reasonably priced bike, we'll see about doing something with it after the fact, which will probably be another video, but I have some ideas of maybe doing a little something with this bike. But for now, I'm going to address a few of the things that we've got it running, but I do not have air filters or an airbox on here, and we're missing the side cover. I didn't have a key for it, and oh, I need a battery as well. So let me start going over some of these items. If you ever get a old bike like this, a lot of times the key will be missing along with many other things. Now on this one, the ignition, on my previous video I showed you how you can kind of bypass that to get things going, but it's nice to have a key for many reasons. An ignition is only $20. Actually, I think I saw as low as $16 for some knockoff ones shipped. So that's not a terrible price, but we're trying to keep this down to under $100. The problem is, even if you get a key and an ignition, then you still need a key to open the gas tank and a key to unhook the seat. Almost every motorcycle has a, of this vintage anyway, has a seat that opens. So in order to save some money, what I did, and I am sad to say that I did not make a video on it, but I made my own lock picking tools. I've always been interested in picking locks, just as a kind of a hobby thing, not as a criminal activity so much. But there's a YouTuber that I watch a lot of called the Lock Picking Lawyer. Pretty interesting videos. Check him out if you want. I have no affiliation, but I watch his videos and I'm always very interested in how easy he makes it look. Of course, he's a pro, so I am not a pro at really anything, but I definitely am not a pro at picking locks. That being said, excuse me here, reaching around the camera, I ended up making my own lock picking tools. So yeah, well, how else would I do it? So I made a torsion wrench and a lock pick. And I'll show you basically how these work. And what I did is I picked the locks on the motorcycle and I removed most of the tumblers in the lock. And now I have a spare set of keys that came with my Kawasaki Nomad project. And now these keys work for that motorcycle, for the seat, the gas tank, and the ignition. So it did take me a little while, but I learned how to pick locks a little bit. I mean, I'm definitely not an expert on it, but I did it, and I made my own lock picking tools. Let me show you quickly basically how these work. Right here I have another ignition. This is a spare ignition for the Kawasaki Nomad project, which I am still chasing some electrical gremlins on. But you take your torsion wrench, and that will, let's make sure I'm in the right end of this thing here. You go on the bottom of the lock, and that will apply a little bit of turning force to the lock. And then with your pick tool, and this is just one that I made, there's lots of different ways you can make them. Then you just go in, and when you're putting a little bit of pressure on the lock, you go in and you feel for the first pin, and then you can press it up, and you will feel it click. I don't know if you're gonna be able to hear it on here, but you'll be able to feel it click, and you have to go through all of them. And this lock I have not been able to pick yet, but I've gotten very close. This one is a little bit trickier to pick than the one on the KZ750. But I don't doubt that if I messed around with it that I would get it. In fact, the first time that I tried to pick the seat lock on the KZ750, it took me about 3 to 5 minutes. That's not too bad for a beginner. I'm sure someone who knew what they were doing could have picked it in about 15 seconds. But there you go. I'll go show you my key that now works to open the seat. I'll show you that the seat is locked, and now the seat is unlocked, and the ignition is on and off, and the gas tank. So there you go. Probably would have been, you know, for the amount of time it took me, I could have just bought an ignition. I could have pulled these all off and took them to a local place to maybe have a key made. I don't know, maybe 30 bucks, but no, we are $0 into it, and we have an operating key system. Okay, the next thing we are going to look at is the Airbox. Now, I considered just purchasing individual air filters to put on here. It's easier to see on this side. To put on the back side of the carburetors, I would have just needed 2 small ones. They may or may not have fit in here, but most of the time when you run those, the bike just never runs properly. You can run okay, but you got to mess around with carburetor jetting. So on eBay, fortunately this bike was around for several years. The model KZ750 was around for like 3 or 4 or 5 years, and I got myself an Airbox. I got myself an Airbox here for about, I think this was $17 shipped. Now this is just the Airbox, but inside of this nasty bucket here, I have got a filter for it. I've got the lid for it, and I've got the carburetor boots as well. So I'm going to assemble all this. We'll get that installed on there, and we'll see how it looks. Airbox installed. Unfortunately, take half the back of the bike apart, and part of my low bucks getting this thing going is getting a set of tires for either free or next to free. So I have some friends who have some older takeoff tires they got that maybe have 1,000, you know, 2,000 miles left on them or whatever. This bike's not going to see a lot of miles under my low bucks approach, but I don't have them yet. So I got that back tire off, and I got to put it back on, and then I'll have to take it back off again, because this Airbox was not going through top, the side, this side. Take the back wheel off and the inner fender and go all the way through. But it is installed. My air filter actually doesn't look too bad, doesn't look too good either, but looks like it might have had some foam on it at one point, but I think it's going to be okay without it. You know, better than nothing. So we'll put that in there and put the lid on it. And while I have this off, I saw a grease zerk right there. So I'm going to grease the swing arm. That's pretty cool. Older bikes have stuff like that. Newer bikes do not have that. You know, you got to take the entire thing apart. But then again, newer bikes have much better bearings and bushings. This probably has a nylon bushing or something in there. All right, we got the wheel back on here. Let me show you a little something here real quick. And there is the ugly chain. Now tell me, what do you think? A little bit of cleaning. I think this chain will clean up okay. It's been sitting and it's really rusty, and we're trying to get this thing going for under $100. Drivable for under $100. Somewhat safe. Chains are not expensive, but that's going to probably just about double our budget. So we're going to clean this one up and we'll do some local riding and see if it's going to work. If not, I've got a couple of used chains that I would happily put on here. Now, this is not something that I would recommend usually, but you know, we're trying to do this super cheap just as a kind of an experiment. And you know, maybe not everyone will be able to do this because you don't have the parts hoard that I have. On that note, the side cover, I found one on eBay. It was a buy it now. The guy wanted about $30, and I threw out a buy it now offer of $20, and he accepted it, $20 shipped. So we have a side cover. I don't know if this is the same color. It looks pretty good, huh? The problem was that we didn't have any of these little rubber grommets in here. Now those aren't expensive. You could order those up, I don't know, $2 each. But in my parts hoard, I have a whole bunch of these. And these are maybe not the exact right ones, but they're gonna work okay. So like I said, anytime I get something like that one over there that's just gonna be destined for the scrap heap, I take nuts and bolts and washers and anything like this, and I have them all organized out in my garage for things like this. There we go, now it's got that complete look. I spent a little bit of time over here on this engine case and scrub the fins a little bit with a wire brush. I know none of that stuff really matters. Like that side cover, what does that matter as far as the safety and rideability of this thing? Not much, but it was $20. So, I mean, that's really the only body piece that was missing on this thing. So, it just looks more complete. All right, so now I am waiting on a battery and the front and rear tires. So I'm done for today, but we'll come back once I get those and we'll finish this thing up. Okay, I've been sidelined a few days on this project here. I kind of set it aside because that gosh darn Vulcan has been kicking my ass. But I think I just solved it, so I'm a little bit happy here in the garage, even though it's hot. But we're back at it here for our let's see if we can call it the $100 budget bike or whatever. So I got myself a battery and a speedometer cable, and look what I got over here. Off of Offer Up, I got 2 free tires. These are used tires, of course, but they are good tires. We don't have sidewall cracking or any of that sort of stuff going on these. And they also have tubes as well, so I think right now with the components that I have purchased, we are at $77, so I have $23 left to spend. This fuel valve is not great. It only works in one position, but it works. So like the reserve doesn't work. So I just have to keep it topped off. These fork seals are leaking pretty bad. And changing them out would be a good idea. Those are about $20. The problem is that if I change them out, I'm afraid that all this rust is going to cause issues. But since this is an old bike and it's not in the best of shape, I'm not afraid to take a little bit of maybe like 600 grit sandpaper. Once I get those tubes off, clean them up a little bit. I don't really think there's anything wrong with that. If I knock that rust down enough that I can't feel it with my finger, and some of this I've already hit with the light grit sandpaper, and Some of this rust just comes off with your fingernail. And then we have the chain, which is questionable. Now I think this is a 530 chain, and I have at least 2 of them, if it's a 530. Or maybe I have a 520 and a 530 chain. But I have at least 2 chains sitting over here that are used chains off of other people's bikes. And they're not good, but I would trust those chains before I would trust this rusty chain here. So I think my next purchase is probably going to be fork seals and a master link once I find out if those chains will fit. But for now, I am going to install this battery, get the proper battery in here. I'm going to take the front wheel off. We'll check the wheel bearings as well while we have it off. And I am going to change out the tire. We'll install that speedometer cable. And then we will take off the back wheel a second time. And we will get the rear tire installed. So I've got plenty of videos on tire changes and that sort of stuff, so I'm just going to get that done and we'll come on back. Okay, I got my new used tires mounted up and the battery installed and the speedometer cable installed. So now I'm going to go in the house and order up some fork seals, which means I'm going to have to take that wheel off again, but that's okay. And I am going to order up a 530 link. The chains I have are not 530 chains, but I know I'm going to be changing one here soon. Before I do that, I'm going to look up the amount of links that this one takes versus the amount of links on the other one. I imagine it will fit, but a used chain will be good enough for this bike. And at that point, I think I'm going to go just over budget because the seals are $20, a link is about $5. That'll put us at about $102. And I think I'm going to buy a can of high heat paint if I don't have one. And we'll paint that exhaust just because this is a decent looking bike. So a couple more days here, we'll come back to this and I'll get those seals installed. Morning, California sucks. All right, so we got our fork seals. These are like the dust boots here, and we got a master link clip and some high heat paint. So I don't know why we're focusing like shit here, but we're gonna change out those fork seals, and if we can focus, I'm gonna put some paint on there, and I don't have the chain yet, so we'll get to that. This is what I was talking about the rust on these fork tubes. Most of this is up above where the fork seal travels, but any place where that fork seal is going to have contact with this fork tube, you want this to be perfect, and obviously these are not. A lot of this is up. This right here is where the clamp is at, and this is at the very top of the stroke of the cylinder here. But I'm going to clean that up with some WD-40 here and some 600 grit sandpaper. So I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. Well, it doesn't look a whole hell of a lot better, but it is definitely smoothed out. Like I can still feel these areas, but they're much smoother. There's not a rough transition. Now, this is not an ideal solution. Obviously, your ideal solution is to replace these fork tubes. The problem is on a bike of this vintage, trying to find one that's in good shape. They're out there, but you're definitely going to pay for them. There's companies that will re-chrome these for you, but you're definitely going to pay for it. So for this project, we are just going to clean them up, and they will eventually start to leak again, but this is going to definitely give us some time. This bike's not going to see multi-thousand mile days or anything like that. If it sees a couple thousand miles in the next year or two, I would be surprised. So for what this bike is and what it will probably be used for, this is going to be just fine. So I will finish this fork up. This one's already been rebuilt and reinstalled, And on this one, it had a lot less corrosion. There's some on there as well. So, well, there she is. Got a little bit of paint on the exhaust. Looks a little bit better. Seat cover is probably the biggest detractor right now, and I don't really know what to do. I don't want to put any tape or anything on it. I think that just looks crappy. So I guess we're just going to deal with it for now. But we've got an operational and complete and a little bit better looking and a little bit safer bike. The only thing I haven't completed out of my list of things I said I was going to do is the chain. I'm just waiting on my buddy to change his chain off of his bike. And then we're going to put his old chain on here. I just think that'll be better than running this old chain. I'd rather run a 2-year-old chain than a who knows how old of a chain. So now let's do a cost breakdown here. Balls. There's my master link. All right, so we've got the parts listing here. Airbox was $18. Side cover was $20. Side cover was really not a requirement. Battery was $30. Fork seals $22. The master link $6. Speedometer cable $13. And then for the high heat paint was $8. So we got a grand total of $117 into this bike. And I think at this point I would be willing to ride this bike couple 100 miles at least. So I think that's what I'm going to do with it. So once I get the paperwork squared away, which is going to cost probably as much as the parts did, once I have this thing legit registered for the street and I have legit insurance on it, we are going to do a camping trip on this $100-ish bike, just to say that we can do it. I have no intentions of keeping this bike, but I think it's a pretty cool concept that you can get into motorcycling for really cheap if you know how to work on it and you're not afraid to get your hands dirty. Because deals are out there. Maybe you're not going to find a deal like this, and maybe this one ain't going to make it more than 10 miles. I have no idea, but we're going to find out. It's going to be a little while though, so stay tuned. Ha ha! I got you hooked, suckers. Ha ha! If you're digging what I'm putting out, go ahead and give me that thumbs up. Leave a comment down below, and if you are not already a subscriber, why are you not? Why not? You can leave a comment why you're not too, probably because I'm crazy or don't do things the right way or whatever, but I'm having fun, so I hope you are too. Thank you very much for watching. Get out there and find your adventure. Adios.